Alright, so we can actually talk about normal things now.
Doctor Who.
Well,
I
what you got
I have a suggestion for a good film of the decade, or one of the best. And I know one of us, or one of you agrees with me. Captain America Civil War.
Oh god,
That's
careful.
alright.
ER and YMS gonna get triggered.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really get too upset about other people enjoying things that I might not.
We do. We hate
Because,
it.
like, when it comes to like Marvel movies like that, I just like, you know, they're just not for me. I'm like really not invested in them in the same way that, you know, Star Wars. So
Hey,
I don't
Adam,
know,
let me
Adam,
ask you about that.
Probably agree with this. Is that I just don't. I think Marvel movies are so inoffensive in that they're so milquetoast, color by the book. You know, it's kind of like hard to get mad about them, and that's not coming as somebody who's like a huge fan of the comic books. I don't give a shit about Marvel movies. I didn't get excited about Infinity War. I didn't get excited about any of that shit. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, it's another Marvel movie. Neat.
But what is it? What is it that's
when
causing you guys to not like it? Like, what would a Marvel movie have to do to impress both of you? Would it have to be better cinematography or writing or death?
No,
death.
No, because like so when it comes to the presentation,
stakes, yes,
stakes.
Do anything different.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I enjoyed Infinity War because there were stakes in that movie, so that actually helped in that sense. Infinity War.
There weren't really stakes, were they? Because
I know, but for that movie, there were.
Here we go.
There weren't when you got to the movie after that, but for that movie, there were some stakes, I think. So, and you know, it ended in a way that didn't wrap things up in a nice, happy bow. You know, I liked that. It was also really well paced because they were forced to include so many different storylines that they cut out a lot of the fat. Usually in Marvel movies, there's a lot of like kind of forced comedic breaks that I'm not really a fan of. Like I never really get too much into the humor, and I found that was really trimmed down for Infinity War. It felt like every scene more or less had an excuse or a purpose towards being there. It didn't really feel like it dragged on, so that's really what helped my experience there. When it comes down to like the overall presentation of Marvel movies, they're not like terribly presented, but they do kind of feel bland to some extent. You don't really see much of the director's personality at all, which is part of why whenever you got like a director who really wanted to have their personality shine, like Edgar Wright, that wound up getting canceled because, you know, then it was just conflicting.
How would you
with
explain James Gunn?
Disney and Marvel wanted the films to be like, yeah, James Gunn has like his own comedic personality, but it's not so much in the directing style, I don't think.
You don't think so?
Like,
I think Guardians is very
kind
unique.
There's elements there, but nothing that I would really consider to be enough to write home about, honestly. Yeah, I just the music is really unmemorable for the most part. There's a great Every Frame a Painting video on the scores of the Marvel universe, and
there's someone did a response to it and debunked most of it.
In terms of my own experience with Marvel movies in general, I would say that the biggest reason why I'm not huge on them is because they're all right to me. There's nothing like so exceptional about the way that they're presented, or really any element for me as someone who's not already invested in these characters. I'm not like a comic book person. So when it comes down to the presentation, when everything is just like fine, and especially also the story, like you can kind of predict where things are going, you know how it's going to end for the most part in every film. I want to see something that's either so terrible that I'm entertained or so amazing that I'm entertained. But when we get down to like the middle of the road, just like this was all right, I really just like I prefer not to watch those movies. When I could essentially take a Marvel film and imagine how it's going to be and get more or less the same experience as going to the theater, when I could just sit at home and imagine it instead.
No, I completely agree. As someone who is invested in the characters, who has read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comic books, I don't care. And that sounds bad, but it's like I'm honestly more interested in DC movies only because they're so likely to be terrible as much as they are to be decent. And I don't know what that is in me. I do know what it is. I know what it is that I showed up. I used to go to Marvel releases in costume, okay? I was that kind of fan. And I showed up to see Man of Steel in a costume,
Hmm.
and I'm a huge Superman fan. And my friend who hates Superman sat next to me in the theater and watched every bit of joy and happiness and excitement drain out of my face. And I have never felt anything about a comic book movie since then.
Yeah.
That's
understand
pretty
that.
much where I'm at.
I waited 4 hours to see the premiere of Indiana Jones 4 because I was excited to see an Indiana Jones movie in theaters, and that didn't really go so well. It kind of killed my enthusiasm. But as for the MCU, what did you guys think of The Boys in comparison?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to it at least.
Okay, yeah, you got to check
Seems like
that
something
one
that
out.
might be up my alley.
I
don't
I
hate
wanna
Marvel
see how
movies.
you-
They just don't do anything for me anymore. I want something different from them, and let me put it this way, okay? Because the Marvel movies are following the exact same trend that the comic books are following, which is that they kind of they go towards a certain thing that an actual stake, if you want to call it that. They're going through for, oh man, like with Endgame, oh man, people are actually going to die, and then they immediately reverse it. Let me put it this way. There was a really good story, and this is reflected both in Marvel with Daredevil as it was reflected in DC with the Green Lantern series. In Green Lantern, it was with oh shoot, what's the name? Parallax, and with Daredevil, it was the story called Shadowland, where in Daredevil story and in Green Lantern story, they became the bad guys. They became a true supervillain, and then in both stories it got dropped because we can't let that character actually become a bad guy because they're the good guy. And in the Parallax storyline, it was like 10 years of time that had passed, so it was far longer for Hal Jordan to be quote unquote redeemed. But it's that I see the things that I dislike about comic books now being reflected in comic book movies. And what I like in comic books, particularly something that DC has done well, and this is true, is in legacy characters. So we have Batman should pass the mantle to Dick Grayson, who should pass the mantle to, I don't know, Jason Todd or whoever, or to Damian Wayne. That's what's fun, is seeing the mantle passed. Having the same characters rehash the same stories, rehash the same problems over and over again is boring. And even for me as a comic book fan, it's stupid.
But do stakes only have to be whether or not a character dies?
No, it does not. It has to. We have to see the character grow and change.
Yeah, but we have done that with several characters over the MCU, and Civil War makes use of all of that in their story, where they're.
I don't know if they really did. I think that Marvel has done a pretty good job. I will say that Marvel's done a far better job than DC, than Warner, because Warner is shit. But comparatively, we have seen a lot of these characters change, but I don't see where this is going forward. I guess they would have to introduce all new characters. I want to see characters grow and change and then be passed on. And if Marvel's willing to actually do that, to be done with Captain America, to be done with a lot of these characters, then I'm fine with that. Like Hawkeye, for example, is one of my favorite superheroes. He's one of my favorite characters in all of Marvel. And I like him in the MCU, even though he is a completely different character than he is in the comics, because he's had an arc. We've seen Hawkeye be a different person in every movie that he's been in for the small amount that he's been in. So, like, there are little bits of those movies that I like, but overall, I find them very predictable. And because they're predictable, I guess, like, I would compare every MCU movie is very much like Avengers versus X-Men as a comic book story, which is that I know what's going to happen. I know how this is going to turn out. It will always return to the status quo. And that to me is boring. And that's just my opinion. But I mean, again, as someone who's been reading comics my entire life, I don't want to see the MCU movies go the same way the comics have been going for decades.
I think that that's what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that we're going to have a bunch of obscure stories that are going to kind of unwind the big buildup that the MCU has, and maybe they'll try and go back and do an alternate version of the same characters, because we've already kind of used up all of the big money plot lines that people are aware of, kind of like the Star Wars situation.
I'll just take the complete reverse position. I think that the MCU for the past decade has actually been some of the most stellar mainstream character work we've actually been able to see from a giant corporation. They've been setting trends and teaching people how the fuck this works with characters. Iron Man's journey is one of the best cinematic character development sequences I've seen. Caps is amazing.
For a major series, I agree. For a major series, yes. I guess that I'm being too harsh. But
the stakes of Civil War are through the roof on an internal level, and then Infinity War is the external. Civil War's question is, will the heroes even be able to... Is it legal for them to defend the world anymore, and how will they ethically move forward with that, on top of the fact that they actually have a struggle internally that has splintered them completely. So now half of them are vigilantes and the other half work for the government. It's fascinating to me.
Extent, yeah. I don't know. I'm not like huge into it, honestly. Like the in terms of like a major franchise having a character develop over time, yeah, it's one of the better ones for sure. There aren't that many franchises that span over this long with this many films and stories within them in the first place. And they handled it really well in terms of connecting everything together. It's a very well-oiled machine. And that's why you see so many other studios trying to replicate that and doing their own extended universe and whatnot. When it comes down to the stakes, I'm like usually in most like PG-13 superhero movies, I don't really feel too invested in the stakes. Like even when it came to Civil War, I'm not a huge fan of Iron Man. I find him kind of annoying personally. And when the conflict of that movie was like, oh, should we be able to save people, or should we get the bureaucratic powers of the United Nations to sign off on it first?
Wrong.
I found that a little silly, honestly. Like, yeah, the villain will wait. They'll wait for you to get the sign off. Come on.
Wrong.
I don't know. I wasn't really into that.
I would say that I agree with you that
that's not what happened.
The character development the character development that has happened in the MCU has been fantastic for being a major motion picture franchise. You do get, like, we do see characters like Iron Man in particular change, although I also think that when we look at, let's just take Iron Man, okay? Let's just take Iron Man. He kind of stopped developing after a certain point. And
what point would you pick? I'm ready for this fight. Let's go. Iron Man's one of the best character journeys in like cinema history.
Okay, I wanted Iron Man to be an alcoholic in Iron Man 3 instead of having PTSD.
Iron Man 3 is the big fuck up. But Civil War attempts and successfully fixes the fuck up of Iron Man 3 quite significantly. Making use of the PTSD while removing the fact that everyone's laughing at it. It becomes like super serious and informs all of his decisions instead.
Well, it does become more serious. Here's the thing. I think that the MCU takes careful steps in a lot of places because it is so calculated. It's calculated in a good way in terms of being very entertaining for everybody. But I do feel like Iron Man is barely a character in a lot of the movies that he shows up in afterwards, like in Spider-Man Homecoming or even in
Can I just interject really quick?
Yeah, sure. We can debate about Homecoming.
Because I'm trying to separate the writing from the presentational aspects in my mind, because I feel like my problem with the movie is that like it has kind of a boring palette to it and the CGI doesn't look very good, and that combination with the kitschy writing is what makes it known as a Marvel movie, and that can be done well and it can be done poorly. But like the character aspect of it, I feel like when you consider that this is a recurring series, that it has movies that are singular movies, but then it also has recurring characters in it that are from other things, they don't necessarily have to have an arc within that story that they're being presented in. Like if Iron Man shows up in an Avengers thing, his arc isn't going to be the same kind of arc as if he has more screen time in his own movie. So like if a character comes in and acts the way that you expect them to in a Marvel movie, I don't think that that's a point against the story. And I'm not exactly sure if it's the actual character and storytelling of their arc that's the problem, as much as it is the way that it's presented and feels like a TV show sometimes.
I think by feeling like a TV show, do you mean like it's a revert back to the status quo at the start of the new episode? Because that's really
I don't think it's on the creative writing side. I think it's on the directorial production side because
well, it's
one
almost
of the
impossible,
guys,
right? When you have so many people working on these movies, to have characters, and look, I don't even think that, because this is a problem in the comic books themselves as well, is that anytime that a writer takes over a character, they give their own voice, they give their own life to that character that could be different from another writer. And I feel like all I see that's happening in the MCU is exactly what I have seen happening in comic books for 40 years.
Yeah, but okay, let me just break that down because I know I've talked to MauLer about this before, but I met with some people that that worked for Marvel. This guy that worked for the Donner Company, Derek Hoffman. Shout out to him. I really like that guy. He's a writer and he was working on an X-Men related show, and he was basically the nerd version of the script editor. He was in charge of making sure if everything was fitting into the Marvel canon and ultimately the feeling of Marvel comics in television format. And he broke down to me that the priorities are the story first, so what the script is entailing and what they're trying to tell, the story, the plot, everything. And then the budget is secondary. And then comic book fans are the third priority because the actual subscription of Marvel Comics is only like 200,000 readers or something. And the mainstream audiences that watch Marvel content are mainstream audiences. They're not comic book fans. So even though I agree with like the fandom menace and all the comic book fans that are, your boy Zach and all these people that are speaking truth to the comic book industry, they're not the target market. So
Oh no, we're not.
no, so when we see Civil War and we see the characterization of Tony Stark and Captain America's argument being almost inverted from the comic book plotline, but it's still the comic book plotline, we get a little bit upset. But if we disconnect ourselves from that presentation and realize they're presenting these stories to the mainstream audience, I think you'll appraise it in a different fashion. MauLer convinced me that the Civil War division is just as good as the one that's in the comic book. Like their values.
You're misunderstanding me. I really don't like the Civil War comic book. I much prefer the movie over the comic book. The comic book was a shit show. The comic book was a shit show for so many reasons. I didn't dislike Civil War. My only point was that my only point in all of this, because apparently people are really mad at me now. The thing is, my only point about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that I kind of don't care about it. That's my only point on it. In terms of Civil War, I thought it was one of the better movies. I thought Winter Soldier was better. I'll put it that way. I liked Winter Soldier better than Civil War. But I thought Civil War was a great film. I liked Endgame. I liked Infinity War. I thought, well, I mean, Endgame I didn't like so much as Infinity War. Infinity War is a good movie. But I just don't have any more like emotional energy to put into these films when every single one seems to end with the status quo being resumed.
That's like the opposite of Civil War, though. The status quo is destroyed by the end of Civil War.
Was it though?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. What are you guys like trolling me right now?
No. It's been a while since I've seen it. When did Civil War come out? Like 5 years ago. So
you're gonna have to do a Civil War video.
No, please, no, because I legitimately don't remember. It's been a while. So what ended in Civil War changed the status quo?
So as far as the government,
please, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm actually
as far as the government are concerned, Captain America, Black Widow, Captain Falcon, Scarlet Witch,
Captain Falcon,
and whoever else is on their team, for lack of memory right now, they're all vigilantes. If they're seen, they'll be arrested, if not killed. That's their position at the end of that movie. And that position prevents them from being a united team for when Thanos attacks. And there's a very good argument to be made that if they were all one united team, they would have defeated him. That's how Iron Man feels at the beginning of Endgame. He blames Captain America for all of what happens.
Okay. I love it. Yeah, I guess, but I have to rewatch it. I will have to rewatch it because I don't.
What was he all saying?
How would they have stood up to Thanos at all? I don't get that.
Well, they came seconds from defeating him, if not for Peter, as in Peter Quill, fucking up. Iron Man fighting him one-on-one actually manages to put up a fight, but imagine the rest of the Avengers being there.
So that's the fault of Civil War that they weren't there?
Sure, they're not a connected
just-
team.
But isn't it a kind of a coincidence that he got on the ship and was brought there?
Who?
All that? Iron Man. And Spider-Man, I guess.
Oh, well, he's reacting, right? And they meet up with Doctor Strange. They're all in the city. The Avengers compound is in, or is it near New York? I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yes, it's in New York. The Avengers compound is outside of New York. But the thing is that this exact same stuff happens in the Infinity Gauntlet as well, in terms of the original comic book adaptation. They're not everybody is always together in the comic books as well. I guess to me, I don't know. I guess because I'm looking at this stuff as somebody who's read all of the original source material, and I'm not saying, by the way, don't get me wrong, because that is not what I'm saying. Is not that it's not close to the source material. In fact, what I'm saying is the opposite. That the source material is boring, and I'm saying as a comic book fan.
Yeah, but they chose this material because they ultimately had a meta narrative that they wanted to plan ahead of time, and they needed a big bad, and the biggest bad that they could come up with was Thanos. I mean, in the comic
Thanos is a great villain. Infinity Gauntlet's a great comic. It is a great graphic novel. However,
it's pretty all right.
I'm just afraid. Oh, I love George Perez, but the thing is that what the failure of comic books is that they are cyclical in nature. And why I have stopped caring. Okay, when the first couple of Marvel movies came out, and I mean, Iron Man, the original Iron Man, Thor, even though it wasn't very good, Captain America, the first one, which was also not that good, but a lot of those early movies, I was very, very excited for them, and I loved the original Avengers, and I was very excited for it. But I started to feel like the movies were a little bit repetitive, in that I didn't feel as if there was any stakes anymore, and maybe that's me being cynical.
Well, if we refocus though, so you said that the status quo wasn't changed. If we just
yeah, it has the status quo changed after the end of Civil War.
Yes,
and you provided an example of that.
Well, and I would agree it has true. Not at the end of Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, and I guess most the status quo does change at the end of Winter Soldier. S.H.I.E.L.D. is destroyed. They're replaced by the Task Force, which you could argue is less of a status quo change, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you, but then I would actually refocus on saying that the main status quo changes in Marvel are way more focused on character, but Civil War shakes up the most.
Of all of the Marvel films, Civil War probably does the most with it. I have to because look, now there's so many Marvel films that I have to even try to remember what happened in each one. So
But doesn't that remind you of the first time that you read the comics? Because that's my takeaway has been that it's been one of the most interesting ways to introduce the comic book experience to people that don't read comic books. Because most people don't know anything about this.
Of my experience reading the comics. Because when I think about my experience reading comic books, and this is just my so this is my subjective experience, which is stupid and bullshit, but it really is. In my opinion. But no, seriously, I can think about times where I've read X Factor, and I can tell you what happened in this issue of X Factor, and I could tell you that off the top of my head. And I'm not saying that I can remember the earlier Marvel movies better than I can a lot of the ones that Age of Ultron I barely remember. I know I fell asleep, and now I know apparently that's my meme, but I fell asleep during what was it? Actually, one of the good X-Men movies, the Days of Future Past, I fell asleep during. I did watch it later, but I fell asleep in the theater during that. Whatever. It's so much, and if you want to call it superhero fatigue, maybe that's just what I get from it. But and I guess that is my own experience, but that is my experience as someone who's read all the comics, and so your mileage may vary on that. As a superhero comic book fan, my mileage is very being bored by seeing things that I read I'm not even 30 yet, but seeing things that I read 10 years ago rehashed. and not seen a lot of. Now, I would say that at the end of the total of the Marvel story, we do get a lot of character resolution. Iron Man has a complete character arc. Captain America has a complete character arc. We see these characters grow and change, but a lot of the individual films feel hollow. I would say Civil War is one of the better ones, but
I mean, that's kind of what
so
I'm
many
trying to
of
defend,
them feel
because
very
you'll find
hollow.
I'm one of the biggest attackers of certain Marvel films. Like, I think Captain Marvel's one of the worst films of like the mainstream. It's just terrible, like in every aspect of writing. It's kind
it's
of insane.
complete shit.
Right, sure.
Captain Marvel is what non-Marvel fans think Marvel movies are.
Yeah, like I'll call a spade a spade. I just I don't know, just a lot of the arguments for Civil War often just run out pretty quick. Like Adam, you're still here, right?
Yeah.
You know, like
Sorry?
you know, like Hulk jumping around to save the world from horrible aliens that'll destroy the entire planet. Is it okay if he kills a few civilians while doing that?
Yes.
Okay. What about like 100?
If the stakes are everybody dies or some number less than everybody dies, I think that the
All right,
option
all
that
right.
is not
Yeah,
everybody
this
dies
is just gonna be a series of
Doesn't-
questions. Should anyone be accountable for the families of those people?
So okay, so in Civil War, where they were like, I saw it only once when it was in theaters.
Mhm.
So was there some sort of plot element of people seeking some sort of like damages financially, or
Well,
what?
we see
correct.
the countries are uniting
Mother.
over the fact that the Avengers don't seem to care about what they leave behind. There's like this many aspects of the film. Dare I say it's the theme.
But not only that, somebody directly implicates Iron Man as the reason why
Their
her
son.
son died.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, there was that kind of like a moment near the beginning where they were like, all these hundreds of people that die from really far away in the Avengers, actually they're real people. We needed to remember about that. Yeah.
Hence why
Yeah,
Civil War's
I mean,
great.
like, of course there are going to be like moral implications to it, but when you're dealing with this kind of universe where literally there's characters that can just blow up the planet, I mean, if you got to act fast, you should probably do that. Like
Sure.
have,
So let's
to
put a
have
big
people
tick.
signing off on every
Yeah, yeah,
single
yeah.
action.
Let's put a big
seems-
tick on Hulk. He's good. Even if we had those families in the room, we'd be like, guys, he saved the world. Okay, so fuck off. All right, good stuff. Next person, Cap, downing the helicarriers in Washington after he'd had them neutralized, which actually goes against what Captain Fury wanted. And his reasoning was, these weapons in anyone's hands are too fucking dangerous, so I'm going to crash them all. And there's people screaming. He destroys like this enormous building, and they're cleaning up the wreckage for it 8 years later. We got a throwaway line in Homecoming to say that.
So, I mean, like, if we're gonna talk about Captain America doing something dangerous for no reason against
It's not
the
no
wishes
reason. A lot of people agree with his decision.
Well, I
I
mean, for his own
think there's
reasons,
safety to it,
whatever.
because there's still SHIELD agents on board all the helicarriers, so it's dangerous. The thing is that their
Yeah.
plan to kill millions of people has been neutralized.
Yeah. So I mean, like the what's Sam Jackson's character's name again? You just
Fury.
said it. I
Nick
forget it already.
Fury.
Nick Fury. I mean, like if let's say they wanted to have some sort of system in place where there was a first in command, and then people would be held accountable for their actions if they went against the orders of Nick Fury, then that would make a lot more sense than what I remember in the movie being as anytime you want to be able to save the world, you have to get like several nations
All right,
to
just
to
pause,
sign
pause.
and,
We're
collectively
getting
agree to a
there.
document. Like that's the issue that I had,
I'm
right?
climbing up the staircase. So their
Okay.
current system was that SHIELD took care of them, and Fury answered to the big council, or the World Council. And Ross actually says that was their setup, but they can't let that be the setup anymore. And this what prompts this is Age of Ultron, where Iron Man essentially nearly destroys the entire world himself. There is no saving the world aspect, because he caused Ultron. And then it gets punctuated by the beginning of Civil War, where
Could I say
Scarlet
real
Witch
quickly
makes-
that Age of Ultron is my favorite bit of development for Tony Stark.
Yeah, I think that's
but
fair.
I felt like it was dropped. I felt like it wasn't meant
Dropped?
to. Okay, it was dropped. Okay, so okay, I really hate to do this because I have to bring up the original comic books.
Okay, well,
Okay,
wait.
okay,
Can we
yes.
pause? We
Fair.
pause
All right,
that? Pause that, because I'm getting
Yeah,
there.
go ahead.
So
I'll put that to sidebar.
So, with Scarlet Witch makes a decision to, instead of blowing up a bunch of people on the ground floor, she blows up a bunch of people in an upper floor. She's made essentially a decision to kill a bunch of people to save a bunch of people, and how come she gets to make that decision? This has to stop. There has to be accountability. If a police officer,
Yeah, well, it all comes back down to that famous psychological train experiment or whatever that.
well, but we're
thought
dealing with 5 on each side of the track at that point.
Yeah.
She chose to save Captain America,
Yeah, I mean-
because of course she did.
It's an inevitability when you have this universe where
True.
people have superpowers
Which,
that there's
again,
going to be
and
a lot of-
honestly, man, like with Civil War, I was so fucking glad they finally made that movie, because I was like, how is nobody picking up on this with world governments? This is insane. Like, the Avengers get away with so much shit. And you might be like, they're saving the universe. Like, I don't care if they're saving the universe when they're getting this many people killed. Like, how reckless do you have to be? If you're saving a bus full of children from a terrorist inside it, and you come in firing your machine gun, you shoot him in the head and kill him, you accidentally killed 10 children as well. You're like, well, I saved the bus. There has to be accountability, and that's what Ross is talking about. He keeps and there's actually spots on the map from other places that they could reference throughout the movies, and if you give them a good old watch with a careful eye, you'll be like, holy shit, there's some stuff they're doing in here that's really fucked. And obviously they understand, they get it. And so it's not, you cannot save the world without our approval. If Thanos arrives with an enormous army and they're right outside Avengers HQ, which happens in Endgame, they're not going to wait for a fax from the UN to say they can do anything.
You say that, but did was that not the point of like, was that not the main conflict?
No,
of them
Iron Man
saying,
literally cancels
sign
out
off?
the portion of the government's influence whenever he actually wants to. He's just doing it to appease them in the film, which is the position I actually agree with.
Okay.
Appease the governments, but if something happens that
So,
you
like,
cannot wait for
pretend
approval
like
for,
you're following along with
Oh,
it,
absolutely.
and then just do the same thing anyway. Like,
not the same thing. Say, for example, there is like a Obadiah Stane type character in like an African country who's killing a bunch of people with a giant robot suit. Yeah, they might need to get some jurisdiction issues sorted before they go in and blow everything up. But if we're dealing with an alien that's about to blow up the Earth and he's just arrived, it's like, go for it, guys. Fuck, the UN will get over it.
mm-hmm.
It's just a pragmatic approach. We can't have the Hulk jumping on people every once in a while. We need to actually have someone... Because again, that's the whole point of the film. All these families that get affected, they got no one to account... That's the point of the villain. He's got no one to go to. His wife, his kid, and his dad all died thanks to Tony Stark's, well, PTSD-infused issues of trying to protect the world. He's got no one to lay account
my
to.
issue would be, like, my issue would be with the idea of if they actually did what it was on paper instead of treating it like a case-by-case basis.
Well, I assume that's the point.
I take an issue with the perspective in the film, not necessarily the film itself addressing it.
Do you mean Ross's perspective specifically? Because obviously Cap doesn't agree with it.
Just Iron Man's perspective in the film. And if you, I mean, like, perhaps, I don't know, was there a point where he literally said, like, in the first half of the movie that he's just doing it to appease them, but he'll still, you know,
he said we need to be put in check,
help
but the people on his side say it's good to have one hand on the wheel, and then by the end of the film, he literally lies to Ross in order to help Winter Soldier.
Yeah, the end of the movie, yeah.
Well, sure. That's just Iron Man's position.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like all of us here, if you guys said you'd rather be vigilantes, I'd be like, just agree with them, guys. Like, we'll be vigilantes eventually, sure. But for now, just say yes. And until something horrible happens that we have to go deal with, and they punish us for that, so be it. But for now, we can just say, yeah, sure, we'll do whatever you want, sure.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that
technically,
perspective. I think that makes sense.
The whole movie's a civil war on a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
A misunderstanding of what? Cap is principled. The reason why he won't agree to this is because it's lying.
Okay, so he just disagrees with Iron Man lying.
I'd say he disagrees with the entire premise that a government system could have any control over a group of powerful people because of his experiences with S.H.I.E.L.D.
With Nazis and stuff, and he doesn't want to. Yeah, I mean that is
Iron Man
a
tries to tell him
reflection of the
several
comics.
times. It's just the pragmatic approach. It's not like they're actually handing over the keys to the Avengers' powers, but that's how Cap sees it. He even says it's like that's where it'll lead. And he sees that Scarlet Witch being trapped in the compound is just a step toward that. It's just control.
By the way, nobody can control Scarlet Witch. Let's be really clear. This is the same.
I don't know. A sniper could kill her. You gotta be careful.
Yeah, she can get shot and die.